Hello everyone, back tuning in today's second video. We're going to have a look at the weather next week, 10 days, in today's second video. We're going to have a look at the Arctic Oscillation and the North Atlantic Oscillation. We'll also have a look at the CFSV2 for next month. So quite a lot to cram in for today's second video. We've done the January month-ahead forecast. You can find that on the month-ahead forecast page for 2017. We've created a new page for the year. The first month ahead forecast is there for you. Very complicated January coming up. We think that we'll probably have near normal temperatures, maybe a bit colder later. If you want to know more about that, check out the January month ahead forecast. So before I get on with that, just say about the ads. There's links to articles on all pages. Have a browse, widgets, and click through links. If there's any articles that you're interested in, you have your space for our website. Thanks very much for doing that. Just to start off talking about warm air advection, WAA. Somebody asked me about this on the comment part of YouTube the other day. I thought I'd just start off explaining a little bit about it. So warm air advection is where we take warm air, usually from the Atlantic, and advect it up into the Arctic. And when you get warm air shooting up into the Arctic, it tends to promote a ridge via trough disruption on the eastern side of that warm air advection. So it's one of the things that can be a precursor to a blocking feature, particularly Scandinavian blocking, and at times we get cold easterlies after warm air advection. This is a good example of it from 1991. This is the big freeze of February 1991. So you can see what's going on there. We have got a bit of a ridge already over Scandinavia. It's rather weak and flabby looking, but the main thing on this chart is this really deep area of low pressure and extensive cold pool sitting to the south and west of Greenland. That is stalling to the south of Greenland, and it's sending warm Atlantic winds, southerly winds, shooting up in towards Greenland. If you have a look at the upper air temperatures, you can see how cold it is to the north and west of Greenland, but actually to the south of Greenland, we're pushing in very mild air via those southerly winds. They are penetrating through up towards the Arctic as well, to the north of Scandinavia. So it's becoming quite unusually warm now on the 2nd of February 1991 to the north. And then we've got this deep cold pool running down the eastern side of Europe. So what happens is that on the 3rd of February, again, we're still pumping up those southerly winds from the Atlantic in towards the North Pole, and that is allowing this ridge, which is usually pumped up via warm air, so you think of it like pumping up a tyre, if you like. The ridge is inflating over Scandinavia as these warm southerly winds, or mild southerly winds, are pushing warm air advection up into the Arctic. And this continues into the 4th of February 1991, where that ridge is up to 1,050 millibars over Scandinavia, so it's becoming quite an intense ridge. And again, you can see those southerly southwesterly winds taking the warm air advection into the North Pole. There's the upper air temperatures, again, showing how warm it is to the north of Scandinavia, and usually mild conditions there, but to the eastern side of the ridge we bring very cold air out of the pole and Siberia. So we pump up the warm air into one part of the pole, and correspondingly we push out cold air from the pole into the mid-latitude. In this case, it's going down into eastern parts of Europe. And then it all sets up, as we know, to produce a famous freeze for us. So on the 5th of February, the Scandinavian high is up to 1,050 millibars. The winds are going into the east. Again, we're still moving warm air from the Atlantic up to the northern and eastern side of that ridge of high pressure, western side of that ridge of high pressure, I should say. So it's going through Iceland up in towards the North Pole. And there's the wind going round into the east, dragging in that bitterly cold air from the east. So by the 7th of February 1991, we was firmly in the grips of a severe cold spell. There's the famous upper air temperatures for the 7th of February 1991, showing that really severe cold pool that's been pushed out of Eastern Europe via the easterly winds. Again, notice that for actually for Scandinavia, going northwards in towards the North Pole, it's looking rather warm, though it is now starting to turn cold. We begin to lose the warm air advection from the pole, and cold air is beginning to sink back. And of course, a few days after that, I think about a week after the big freeze of 7th, 8th of February 1991, it began to turn a little bit milder into the second half of the month as the blocking begun to break down. But anyway, that's warm air advection in a nutshell. It's where you take warm air usually from the Atlantic, shove it up into the North Pole, and you inflate a ridge, kind of like a tyre being pumped up. And then the wind goes into the east. Usually it's over Scandinavia that you get these ridges from warm air advection. And that sets us up for a very classic easterly severe cold flow. So I suppose it's one of the things we should be looking out for, some WAA, to try and get us into some colder weather in the coming weeks. Actually, it has been fairly chilly so far in January. So the provisional central England temperature is looking like this, 3.8 degrees, an anomaly of just 0.3 degrees above average. I suspect when this updates tomorrow, taking into account last night's frost, we'll probably see this going a little bit cooler than average. But after that, it looks like we'll actually start to lift the temperatures up at the weekend. So probably will tick down a little bit more, actually, around Thursday and Friday. We may perhaps be around a degree colder than average by then, would be surprised. But over the weekend, we may start to lift the temperatures back up once more. This is the Arctic Oscillation Observed and Forecast chart. Then let's see what's going on with the Arctic Oscillation. Remember, this is an index that's reflecting the state of the atmosphere in the North Pole. It's not driving anything, just telling you what the atmosphere is doing. The black line here tells you where the Arctic Oscillation has been, and the red lines at the end where the GFS ensembles are forecasting the Arctic Oscillation to go. When the Arctic Oscillation is positive, you've got low pressure over the pole. When it's negative, you've got high pressure over the pole. In winter, high pressure over the pole usually means that we're pushing cold air out into the mid-latitudes, kind of like what you're just looking at from 1991 in some ways. So you'll push cold air out into the mid-latitudes when the Arctic Oscillation is negative and you've got blocking over the pole. And it just depends where the blocking sets up. It's not a guarantee that we'll get cold from it, but usually when we have our coldest spells, we are in a period of negativity in the Arctic Oscillation. So, back into the autumn, we're generally negative for October and November with the Arctic Oscillation. In December, we went positive. That's associated with the fairly mild December we've just gone through. Of course, the latest forecast is to be remaining on the positive side through the second week of January. So we're about neutral now with the Arctic Oscillation, but it looks like we're going more positive again into the second week. And then after that, around middle of the month, this is 6th January just here, looks like we're going quite negative. However, we've got to bear in mind that these charts have been signaling this shift towards a negative Arctic Oscillation for quite a few weeks now, and hasn't really come to anything. So always a lot of doubt about what's going on beyond sort of a week to 10 days. The trend of the model is clearly to move things into a negative Arctic Oscillation, but whether that ever comes off, we're just going to have to wait and see. Same idea from the North Atlantic Oscillation. This is again an index that's reflecting the state of the atmosphere, this time in the North Atlantic as opposed to the North Pole. Again, we're around neutral now, maybe on the slightly negative side of neutral. Through the second week of January, we go into positive territory, and then the trend is probably to move back towards neutral, or maybe slightly negative with the North Atlantic Oscillation by the middle part of the month. So again, this is telling us that we're going to strengthen westerlies a bit through the second week of January. Looks fairly mild from the weekend and into next week. And then up towards the middle part of the month, we may start trying to turn things colder from the north, lose that influence of the Azores High and the low pressure around Iceland, produce westerly setup. But again, we have been seeing with these charts, they have been trending into negative territory, both with the AO and the NAO, and not really come to very much. So again, a lot of uncertainty really in relation to any movement into a negative NAO in the near future. These are the GFS temperature and precipitation ensembles for the next 2 weeks. The red line here is a 30-year upper air temperature average. So a little bit milder than average today. We're going colder than average from the middle part of the week. We're just on the periphery. I was talking about this yesterday's video. We're just on the periphery of the big freeze that's going to be engulfing most parts of Europe. And we do, just a few hours, Wednesday into Thursday, we do get that cold air onto the eastern side of the country. But after that, we lift the temperatures up. They're going mild over the weekend, and it also get a little bit of tick down early next week. That's another little drop in the temperature that's being picked up on early next week, but again, not amounting to too much. Generally, this whole period into the second week of January is looking rather mild. Now, to the middle part of the month, dates are on the bottom of the chart, of course, so this is mid-January just here. By the time we get to that point, it looks like we are trending cold. It's been a consistent signal from the GFS since New Year's Day to start producing colder weather around the middle part of January. After what's gone before over Christmas, we was looking at colder weather for early January, and then as got up towards the new year, colder weather was being signalled by the GFS model and its ensembles. Colder weather was being signalled for the second week of January, and that's gone by the wayside. So now it's been signalled for the middle part of January. Whether we ever get to this colder weather, we'll have to wait and see. Keeps being put back, and eventually we're going to arrive at April, and we may still not have got to the cold weather. But we'll wait and see. It is a clear signal from the GFS at the moment to be trying to turn things colder into the middle of January. And that goes along with the Arctic Oscillation and North Atlantic Oscillations trending negative. So let's just wait and see whether this one does eventually come to anything. Temperature anomalies for the next week showing that the far northwest of Europe, so Scandinavia, Denmark, UK and Ireland, a little bit milder than average. Elsewhere, significantly colder than average, particularly so, again, down into the southeast of Europe, very cold, through the Balkans, talked about this a lot last couple of days, but through the Balkans into southeastern Europe and over then towards Turkey, looking very cold. And I suspect we will push these cold temperature anomalies further east with that into the Middle East as we go through into the second week of January. This precipitation anomaly showing that in the west of Europe it's generally drier than average but close to the ridge. Again, over in the east of Europe it's wetter, or there's more precipitation around. Of course, with the cold temperatures, the vast majority of that precipitation is going to be snow. So this is the GFS for Saturday, where we've got all that cold air going down into the southeast. You don't want to mention that too much. I talked about it very extensively yesterday, but cold air is going down in the southeast of Europe at the weekend. We're on the mild side of this ridge, bringing in the westerlies, as is most of Scandinavia. Going up to Sunday's position is maintained, and in the start of next week as well. Looks like a bit more on the south of Scotland by Monday, some rain there. Otherwise, still in those mostly mild and fairly dry conditions. Into next week, and very gradually, it looks like we're trying to weaken the ridge. But even by Thursday, still a lot of high pressure around across France and down into Spain and Portugal. We need to get that out of the way, get it out of Spain if we want to get any sustained cold weather. Whilst this high pressure is sitting around the west of Europe, it's always very difficult to get winds in from the north and from the east. Now, eventually, BGFS does see this change. This is Day 10, Friday 13th of January, still the high pressure across Spain, but it is weakening. It's turning more unsettled up to the north and west, maybe a bit stormy actually there across Scotland. And beyond that, the heights do pull out of Spain eventually up to the middle part of January as the winds turn into the north. So that's how we're looking on the 17th of January, with proper northerly, bitterly cold air coming out of the pole. Notice the heights have gone from Spain finally, and they're setting up to the north and west of the UK. That's the extended range of the GFS, and whether that ever comes to anything, I'm really uncertain, just because of what's gone before. Over the past few weeks, where we've been trying to get this sort of development, and it's not happened so far. Will it happen into the middle of January? We are just going to have to wait and see. I certainly wouldn't want to be putting any money on it, though. This is the ECWS, so again, the high pressure's there to the south of the UK on Saturday. It's still there on Sunday. It's going to be a fairly pleasant weekend, I think. The temperature's quite mild, probably a lot of cloud, but it'll be useful. And then we go through into the start of next week, and we get that little bit of a cooler push from the northwest that we just saw on the GFS ensembles, but it doesn't last long. The wind's going back into west again through the middle part of next week. We finish up on day 10, Friday 13th of January, looking actually a little bit stormy, quite a deep area of low pressure coming in then. If that was to trigger, if that's to go in that sort of direction, would that trigger the heights to pull up to the north and west and possibly turn the winds into the north? It could do, but you would want to roll on 2 or 3 more days to see where that goes. But sometimes an intense area of low pressure like that going on a southerly track can be the trigger to change the pattern a little bit. It does look as though, as we run through this, it does look as though the heights are beginning to pull out of Spain a little bit by day 10, trying to get out into the middle part of the Atlantic. We've got to get that high pressure away from Spain to get any particularly cold weather. These are the ECMWF ensembles for De Bilt, that's in Holland. So they're going to come into the bitterly cold air, the big freeze, just a couple of days for the middle part of the week. There we go with the ensembles. Most of them are actually going down into sort of freezing temperatures in Holland just for a couple of days at the end of the week. But then you see that the temperature trend is to lift upwards over the weekend and into next week. It's looking pretty mild. But then to go through to the second half of next week and run up to the middle of January, the trend looks like it's downwards there for De Bilt. So it looks like very gradually, after a milder spell over the weekend into start of next week, it does want to start turning things a little bit colder. And there's some snow spikes as well in the second half of the chart. And there's some snow spikes for Holland actually in association with this freeze that's just going to get to Holland for a day or two at the end of the week. We look at Holland because it's fairly close to the UK. It can't be a complete replica of what we're going to get, of course, but it's fairly close to us. And the trend, anyway, looks like it's to turn things cooler up towards the middle part of the month, possibly going cold, but again, we'll want to go too over top with that. Finally, CFS-V2 for the next month. So these are 500 millibar height anomalies, break it down into week periods. The first week period is the 3rd through to the 9th of January. Got that ridge out to the west. There's that cold trough extending through the east, bringing the big freeze to much of the east and southeastern Europe. But we remain fairly mild there with that high pressure out to the west of us, bringing the winds in off the Atlantic. So close to a big freeze, but didn't quite come off. This is week 2, which is the 10th through to 16th of January. Looks quite unsettled, this one. Again, low pressure extending down. Quite an odd-looking chart, really. Low pressure's through the north of Scotland into Scandinavia, and it extends down into Eastern Europe. That still looks quite cold for them. The ridge is in the Atlantic, further away from us, so it means that the jet stream might be going more on a southerly track. We might be pulling in some cold air from the northwest. Again, won't want to go overboard on the cold signal, but I think the way that's lined up between the ridge there and the low pressure there, we're probably pulling down cooler air from the northwest as we're going up towards the middle part of January. Week 3, which is the 17th through 23rd of January, that's showing quite a blocking feature to the north of Scandinavia, extending back into the pole. Low pressure's out to west and to the southwest of us, and that looks a little bit of a battle. I think we are on the cold side of a jet stream there. We're doing something like that with the flow. It looks different compared to what's gone before, and we would be very close to pulling in some really cold air from the east or northeast. So possibly mid-January we do get a little bit of a change to something colder, and then we go through to week 4, which is the 24th through to 30th of January. High pressure and above average heights is in over Scandinavia and Western Russia. Low pressure out west. That looks like a classic battle, really. The low pressure is trying to bring in westerlies. This high pressure over Scandinavia is trying to bring us easterlies. So it's very difficult to say which way that will go. The actual model, the model is actually placing us in a southwesterly, so it's quite mild, but with so much blocking to the northeast, you wouldn't rule out the chance of easterly winds dominating for that one. So a lot of uncertainty there from CFS for the next month. Looks like it still looks like the idea that get to mid-January, in the second half of the month, we have greater chances of turning things colder, and that's something we're seeing within the GFS and the ECMWF as well. But, excuse me, whether that ever really comes to anything because of what's gone before, where we've been trying to turn things colder and it's not come off, we've got to have a big health warning on it. The trend is definitely there to become colder in the middle and second half of January. But, again, will we realise that potential, or will it all finish up in the east and southeast of Europe where we're having a very cold, winter? Going to have to wait and see. That's all for now then, and thanks for watching.